a story about a world very different from ours.
'Tis a world where all people are equal and no conflict exists, much like the world His Highness once dreamt of.
To put it another way, this is a fantasy.
Metaphor ReFantazio, the upcoming title from the masterminds behind Persona 3, 4, and 5, has been a long time coming. Revealed back in 2017 under the codename Project ReFantasy, it promised a classical RPG experience set in a traditional fantasy world. Outside of that, information was scarce, but the premise alone was tantalizing. Persona differentiates itself from other RPGs with its modern-day setting, so that team's interpretation of a fantasy world was instantly intriguing. For years, the project remained shrouded in mystery, but it's finally taking shape and is set for launch in fall 2024. Under the leadership of director Katsura Hashino, the last 3 Personas have gone from strength to strength, culminating in the sublime Persona 5. With these games, as well as the unsung but totally awesome Catherine, Hashino and his team have proven themselves to be amongst the best in the industry. Their titles boast impeccable style, rich storytelling and characterization, and deep systems that feed intelligently back into each other. Each subsequent project benefits from lessons learned on the previous one, so they keep getting better and better. Metaphor is building upon these same design pillars of style, story, and gameplay, so the potential for excellence is huge. From Persona 3's effortlessly elegant Mitsuru, to P4's debonair protagonist, and P5's back-alley goth doctor, among countless others, character designer Shigenori Soejima has delivered some of the most stylish characters in gaming. That hot streak is set to continue in Metaphor, whose cast is adorned in clothing that's more old-fashioned than anything we've seen in Persona, but no less fashionable. Our protagonist is rocking that headband, his checkered white coat is super slick, and heterochromia will never not be cool. The supporting cast is rounded out by a towering elf woman, a dude with horns, a fairy, and some weird bat creature. Good character design makes you want to learn more about the characters themselves, who they are, where they come from, and what their role in the story is. I'm definitely eager to get to know this new protagonist and his comrades. In addition to Soejima, artists who worked on Neon Genesis Evangelion and Nier Automata were brought on board to provide mechanical design and concept art for this new world. As much as I love existing within Persona's interpretation of contemporary Japan, it's exciting to see such a talented group of creators build something that is entirely their own. That's what makes fantasy so cool, stepping into a place unlike anything you've ever seen, drinking in the history and culture, and marveling at the magic of things that simply cannot exist in the real world. Metaphor promises all of this in spades. Thanks to the outstanding work of composer Shoji Meguro, Persona's style is defined by its music as much as anything. Each game typically sticks to a theme. P3 features a cool mix of hip-hop and electronic, while P4 is more poppy, and P5 goes for acid jazz. In the case of Metaphor, Meguro is looking to religious music for inspiration, while also seeking to produce a score fitting of a high fantasy epic. Given the game's broader scope, Metaphor takes place across an entire country, rather than within the confines of a single city. We could be in for quite the eclectic mix of genres. And while we're talking about style, it would be remiss to not mention the menus. Persona 5s are the best in the biz. They're just so cool, but also super snappy and extremely readable. Metaphor's announcement trailer takes time to show off its own menus because they're equally ostentatious. And look, I get it. Who cares about a menu as long as it's functional, right? Well, me, I do. Metaphor is going to be a long game. Ensuring that the screen you look at most often is visually appealing just makes for a more pleasant experience. We've established that Metaphor is a fantasy game. It takes place in a fictional land with creatures like fairies, elves, and apparently bat people. There's magic and machines unlike anything in the real world. At the same time, the story seems to be an examination of what the word fantasy means. Our protagonist possesses a book about a world very different from the one he lives in. A book where all people are equal and no conflict exists. It's hard to know what role this book will play in the overall narrative until we get our hands on the game. That being said, We do know that this story is about a competition for the throne that erupts when the king dies without leaving an heir. It feels like a safe assumption that the pursuit of this fantasy detailed in the protagonist's book is what drives him to vie for the throne. Weirdly, there also seems to be some connection with our own world. The announcement trailer kicks off with footage of modern-day Tokyo and poses the question, what if the world we live in today is their utopia? Is Earth the fantasy world described in the protagonist's book? I mean, it doesn't seem like it. Earth is certainly not a place where all people are equal and no conflict exists. It would be an interesting twist, though, if our world is somehow this idealized fantasy that the denizens of the fictional land are inspired to create. In any case, the game is about an election campaign. It's a novel idea. I've never run for office in a video game before, but one that makes sense. Traveling the country, meeting different people, and solving problems to win their favor fits perfectly within the traditional structure of an RPG. Keeping in mind that dream of a world where everyone is equal, I'd guess that our party is fighting to build a peaceful, productive society within a divided one. Each party member, at least those who have been revealed, represents a different tribe. We have the tall elf woman, the horned man, the fairy, and the bat dude. How will Metaphor bring these people together, and what will be its ultimate message? How can we find common ground with those who have different beliefs, customs, and upbringings, or even those with whom we have historical conflict? Persona 5 stands as a critique of modern-day society. Despite its more fantastical setting, Metaphor looks to be very much the same. The campaign concept is a good fit within Persona's tried and tested gameplay loop, too. Trailers confirm that Metaphor will both follow a calendar and feature social stats, including courage, wisdom, tolerance, eloquence, and imagination. This time around, instead of hopping between city districts, we're traveling across the full breadth of a country. I imagine investing time in the people and activities of each region will form a stronger bond with them, eventually winning their support for your campaign effort. Like in Persona, making wise use of your limited free time will help you get the most out of the experience. One of P5's great strengths is how well it balances its multitude of systems and mechanics. Leveling up social links not only provides character development, but also unlocks new abilities to be used in dungeons and battles, gives access to shops, and increases those social stats, which then enable you to form bonds with more characters and partake in new activities. Everything feeds back into itself, so that whatever you choose to do with your time, there's always a sense of progress, and it's never a waste. I'm excited to see what Metaphor does to evolve this formula even further. It needs to do more than simply iterate on the Persona formula, though, and it looks like it will. The game's approach to combat is particularly intriguing. It features a mix of real-time and turn-based battles. Director Hashino has spoken about using the real-time action combat as a means of defeating weaker enemies, yet he also says that he wants players to be able to choose at all times. Is action combat truly a viable tactic against bosses, for example? Or will it be necessary to deploy your squad and use the turn-based combat to overcome more challenging encounters? In P5 Royal, you automatically defeat weaker enemies by running into them. Is this a continuation of that idea, or something more inventive? Perhaps even a way to settle the age-old action versus turn-based debate by letting the player choose which one they prefer. If so, it has the potential to be an innovative system. Stylistically, narratively, mechanically, Metaphor seems to have everything going for it. So what could possibly go wrong? I'm confident that it's going to turn out great, but I do have one concern. Length. I said earlier that the Persona games have been getting better and better, but they're also getting longer and longer. P5 Royal is like 120 hours to finish, and while it's complex enough and good enough to justify that amount of time, I definitely don't want anything longer. It's extremely difficult to keep a story captivating and gameplay engaging over such a long time, so I'm hoping for something slightly breezier. 70 to 80 hours would be plenty. As far as I'm concerned, Persona 5 is worthy of rubbing elbows with Super Mario World, A Link to the Past, Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy 6, 7, and 10, Metal Gear Solid 3, and whatever else you want to toss up there on the list of greatest games ever. It's an impossible act for Metaphor to follow, but the good news is that it doesn't have to. Despite clearly iterating on many ideas established by Persona, Metaphor isn't Persona. Hashino and his team have the opportunity to spread their wings, take their musings on what fantasy can be, and layer them atop the lessons they've learned from their previous projects to build something new with its own unique identity. As much as we all love the sequels and remakes we've been treated to in recent years, the games industry always needs new ideas, and Metaphor ReFantazio is primed to deliver just that.